Everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here and to have you all here. I have the fantastic honor tonight to be speaking to Janina from Celonis, and we're going to be talking about sustainability, especially at the scaling moment. My name is Ubomila, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Plan A. We're a software as a service company based in Berlin that enables businesses to calculate, monitor, reduce, and report on their emissions, as well as maintain and develop their ESG performance. I would love to invite Janina to join me on stage, if we could call it like that, and invite you a bit to this conversation that has been actually getting a lot of traction on our channels. People asking, what does it mean for a big company to be doing all these efforts and making it sustainable? So maybe we can start by you saying a few words about yourself and your position in the company.
Thank you, Lubomila, and thank you so much for having me today, for the invitation, and for having the chance to talk to you about this. So I'm Janina. I'm the Director of Sustainability at Celonis, which is also a software as a service company, but based in Munich. So Celonis was founded almost 10 years ago. We are a software company that optimizes the processes in any global business that you can imagine, and also any process that you can imagine. Our product is called the Execution Management System. It's its own category, and Celonis is the market leader. We have the vision that we can basically free up capacity and potential in any company by helping them to optimize their business processes. We are like a layer on top of the operational systems that you can imagine. We have our headquarters in Munich and in New York City. We have about 15 offices now all around the world. And we're especially well known for being one of the rare German unicorns in the space, and also being a hyper-growth company. So we're currently valued at 2.5 billion, and we have about 1,300 employees. When I started about 3 years ago, we had like 250 actually. So I've seen quite massive growth in the last years, and also maybe a bit on my position. So I haven't started as a director of sustainability. I started in the company and built up our academic cooperation program, the so-called Academic Alliance, where we partnered with universities and students and research institutes around the world. And then last year in summer, the topic of sustainability became quite pressing in our organization. I think it was always there. It was kind of part of the DNA, but we said, okay, we really want to build this bigger. We want to make this part of our product. We want to put this at the core. And then we created this role of the director. And I have now the great honor to serve in that role. I report directly to our CEO, Alex Rinke, and I act as a global facilitator. So I collaborate really with every department in the organization. It's a super exciting role. And what I think makes me proud is really to be working on such an important topic and driving things forward here that are much needed.
Wow, this sounds like quite of a journey that not only the company has gone through, but also the decisions that have been made on the topic of sustainability. Can you walk us through your personal journey with sustainability? I mean, you mentioned that you switched positions, and this has been something that has been really deeply connected to you for a long time. But how did you end up developing this passion?
Yeah, it's a good question, and actually also one of the most asked questions that I get, like on LinkedIn or when I speak to other people. I think I always had kind of a passion for products that have an impact and that kind of help to develop society as well. So when I decided to study business administration for my bachelor's and my master's, I always made sure that I, on the side, kind of worked, had internships, had working student positions, had consulting positions in various industries to, first of all, have the practical experience, but also start in industries that kind of work in different market settings. So I started, for example, in the publishing industry and worked for Random House Publishing in their strategy. And that's where I basically developed the passion also for education and knowledge sharing. And it's super interesting to understand how books basically work and how this content industry drives forward. But I also worked for quite some time for Siemens Healthineers and therefore got to know the healthcare industry. So I saw at different angles, like what companies can do, and how you can basically steer your company also with a purpose. And then during my master's, I had the chance to work for the United Nations for some time. And that was really the game changer, to say so, because not only I worked in Geneva and like sat in the famous rooms every day and listened to the policy making and the sustainable development goals and how to report on them and so on. But I also realized that I want to work in this space, but that I want to use my business sense, my business knowledge to drive change. Because when you work in the public sector, you also realize how slow it can be sometimes, or how hard it can be. And I immediately saw, like, this is my topic, but I want to have a different context. And that was the point where I started to educate myself, make sure that I can drive impact in every role that I have. And I did so already in the Academic Alliance. It was a lot about education, democratizing technology, making sure we work also with schools, with like young girls, that we empower people all around the world, also in the underrepresented minority section, that we work with communities. And that was basically the road to sustainability. I think what I added is that I'm fascinated by what our product can do from a company perspective, this process mindset of, if anything becomes more efficient, it can also become more sustainable, because this input-output ratio is basically sustainability. So that was basically what drew me then more into that role. And other than that, I've always been a generalist. And I think if you want to be in sustainability, that certainly helps you, because there are just so many topics to tackle. So being interested in many things helps.
Yeah, that's super exciting that you've seen also these different industries, and you've been able to essentially combine all of these experiences now to transform maybe the way your company perceives sustainability. Let's be honest, like probably starting something as big as sustainability and in a company that is a unicorn is not like just a project that it could last for a few months and then it's kind of implemented. Can you explain to us what does it actually mean to make a unicorn sustainable and to take this journey and these first steps into it?
Yeah. It actually started a bit of like an idea of, okay, this could be possible. And then it also started with some task forces and some little projects and things, how can we put the different initiatives that are already happening with like Academic Alliance, and we had a free product and we had a few people programs, like how can we bring that together? I think what really changed a lot and what is crucial is that we put it in our values. So we defined our values in somewhere in a very explicit way. We call it the Celonis way. You can see it on the website as well. And we acted according to a stakeholder model. And we said we have our customers and the team, and we have our shareholders, and then we also have Earth and society. So within the core values, there is a value called Earth is our future, which embeds basically our belief that there's no plan B, there's only plan A. And that's where we say, okay, this is what we have to consider with every project, with every product, in the same way as we consider customer value, the team, and so on. And this means that this is a priority for the whole company. And that is also the only thing that helps you in hypergrowth to stay a priority and to not kind of be pushed away from the agenda a few months later because other things are more important. It's always there. It's a core value. And that also means that every department can contribute, because it's not just on my task list, it's also on the list of every other team.
Amazing. Maybe I can just touch upon this question with regards to employees, because you mentioned departments. How do employees perceive these kinds of novel values? Of course, no one is going to be against the planet, like hopefully, given how much resources it's giving us, and it's kind of our house. But was this like a more top-down decision that was then informed to the team, or was there like a lot of internal push for this topic to become more prominent?
Yeah. It was definitely a lot of internal push. I mean, for the whole value practice, that happened with the input from the top, from the bottom, from like everyone. There were like multiple exercises. I think we took like a year until we had the final values, and it was clear that we have to consider many different topics. What I perceived from the beginning, even on my first day at the company, was that there are a lot of young people. I mean, we started as a startup. When I came in, most of the people had just finished university. Those are the people, and this is the generation that is ultimately driven. Like every one of them doesn't question sustainability at all. Every one of them is like, oh yeah, I'm eager to contribute. I'm eager to change a few things. And also in the whole way, they're often living already more sustainable than others. So I think it was still like a more of a push from the bottom in terms of like, we want to have this, we want to have different activities to kind of contribute, and we want to have the typical things. Like, of course, we want to make sure that our house is in order, that we as a company are perceived in a sustainable way, and we are all proud of working for this company. But what came from a bit of the top was also that for us with our product, we have a pretty unique market opportunity to put sustainability and prioritize it with our product, help all of our customers and partners, which are some of the largest enterprises on a global level, and help them, for example, reduce waste in their processes, which we have done all the time. Or like now also help them track carbon emissions in the process, or make sure they choose the right suppliers. And this kind of opportunity and the kind of market you open up with, that will become even bigger in the future. Like you can put a price tag on carbon emissions, you can put an economic value on the waste you reduced. And this convinces basically also the CEOs and everyone else that we should make this a priority. But you cannot do one without the other. So this is why you kind of put then sustainability into and say it's a core value, and there's a program for it, and we're on a journey to achieve that. And we need people that work on it, and then it all comes together.
Amazing. If we remove like maybe the lens from Celonis itself, but maybe move it a bit more on businesses in general, how do you think businesses can contribute best to sustainable development? What is the role? We've been talking a lot about impact, how impact should not be excluded from business doing, but there's still a bit of an identity crisis that businesses are going through. And what is your definition of this process?
Yeah. So from a personal perspective, it absolutely and only makes sense that business drives a lot of the change, because first of all, the money is there. Like I've seen that personally at the United Nations. If there's no funding for a development project, if there's no funding for an NGO initiative, it doesn't happen, even if you have the best intentions. And businesses are where the markets are, where the consumers are, where innovation is being built, where the technology usually lies. So they have to embed it because they also have the means to directly do something. I think it was difficult in the past is that still so many people see this as a trade-off and as a conflict. And even we perceive that on some days. So we say, oh, actually, if we want to be sustainable, we should go this way. But the best economic opportunity would be that way. I highly believe that this will change for all businesses, and that as we move towards the crisis, and we're in the middle of the crisis, but as we move towards the tipping point, we basically get a much bigger opportunity, and there will be the point where sustainable only is also the only option. And at this point, business will have no choice. But there will be some first movers that kind of saw this opportunity earlier, picked it up, worked on it already, and are then there and are doing great, and others don't. And I think I sometimes use the current pandemic also as a kind of role model or thing for also the sustainability crisis. And I say, I mean, the ones that also drove some change here, the ones that built the vaccines, the ones that built the masks, that made sure that our supply chains are there, that we are doing okay as a society, were also businesses. And like we needed that kind of innovation, that speed and so on. So this is why I believe like businesses have to drive the change. I think what's super important for businesses is that they are quite honest to themselves what they can impact, because you can have impact on everything, you can have a great purpose, but the most powerful thing is if you think about what is the biggest impact we can have. And if that's one thing that you do, then do that one thing and leave out all the rest. And I think that is what most of the businesses are struggling with. Like they have a feeling, oh, there's kind of a sustainability train and I have to be on it, but I don't really know how. And then they do a few things and it's not strategic, and therefore the value also doesn't bounce back. And then they basically have to stop it again. So yeah, I think that is maybe missing, but that will hopefully come.
It's really interesting to observe what's happening at the moment in the financial institution industry, because there's a lot of discussion about something called the sustainability premium, where actually this trade-off that we're speaking of is totally like turned around, and it's explained how at the end of the day we can see the numbers that companies are making more money if they have lines of their products that are focused on this. Which maybe drives me to the next kind of question that I have. We're speaking about businesses, but at the end of the day, like the topic that we're discussing is so big and is so kind of overwhelmingly challenging to address. Businesses can do as much, but what kind of stakeholders do you think should be involved in all of these activities? You mentioned employees, but are there any others that can also put some pressure on this whole movement so that things move a bit faster?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, it's all interconnected. And we often, I mean, in the sustainability space, we often talk about the systems approach and the systems thinking and so on. But like for anyone else that is not into that, I mean, in the end, it's in every business, in every market, it's offering and demand. It's like people can basically drive things because they ask for it. And people can also drive things because they offer a more innovative thing that then is demanded more. So I feel like with sustainability, of course, businesses can do their kind of point, and like they can do their part. If they don't have any employee that drives us forward, that like still wants to work for the company hard. If they don't have customers who buy their products and their new solutions, maybe even harder because there is no money coming back. But they also need partners, because usually a company doesn't have the know-it-all. Like even like for us, we work in every process section, but of course we are not the experts on every process in the world in deep dive. So this is why you need an ecosystem of partners. You also need the academics, because if you don't do education for the next generation or for certain solutions, you won't have the next generation basically demanding it again. And then you need politics, because for some of the things, if there are no standards and regulations, which we see a lot in reporting, for example, it is even more challenging, and then the obstacles, the hurdles are higher. And then lastly, of course, also the investors and the financial institutions. And we see that gladly. I mean, you mentioned it, there is more demand coming from there, and they also develop better frameworks, they bring in the expertise. So this helps certainly, but you see it's like the whole system needs to come together. And I think what's even more important is that stakeholders don't blame each other in terms of being like, oh, it's your fault, or you should do better, but actually come together and think of, okay, what's my contribution that I can make? What can I bring to the table? But what do other people have to bring to the table? And then kind of align on that. And I have a feeling that right now we're still sometimes in this like blaming phase of where we say, okay, because they don't do it, we don't do it. And then nothing happens. So that's my perception.
Yeah, this is maybe a nice leeway to the topic that is sometimes, when it comes to sustainability discussions, a bit of an elephant in the room, which is greenwashing. Before we launched the event, we were chatting with you about this, and I kind of how, you know, we look forward to the moment when there's some clear guidelines and on transparency about these things and so on. But like, how do you make sure that greenwashing is not in any way happening in Celonis when it comes to reporting, compliance? You're super well informed on the topic, but this is a big company and there's probably a lot of people working with you on creating reports and so on. So how do you navigate this process without accidentally bumping into greenwashing?
Yeah. I think one super important part of it is like define greenwashing and drive the awareness for it. Like educate the people on, okay, some things are right and some things shouldn't be communicated in that way because it's just wrong. Because I think it's like what happens a lot with sustainability, people get super excited about it. And then as a company, once you step out and you say, oh, this is a priority, and then we do a few things, I mean, you want that everyone takes it up. You want every employee to be involved. You want everyone to be informed. And I also want every employee to talk about it on social media and so on. Like, this is great because this drives this kind of employer branding value that everyone also talks about. But here's exactly the problem. If you just focus on the end, like if you just focus on what kind of value can sustainability bring, and one of those values is reputation, employer branding, and so on, you have the kind of risk that also PR and employer branding are the first ones to knock at your door and be like, what can we talk about? Like, are there any concrete things? And as long as you don't have concrete things, you should focus on just telling the story about the journey and about the strategy and the direction, but you shouldn't make up any kind of results that are not there. And that's something that we're, for example, strongly focusing on, like, how can we tell our ambitions? How can we talk about what we want to do to also attract customers, partners, employees, and so on to help us, but be very honest about the achievements that we do. And that means, for example, that maybe it's not the first thing that you do is creating a website and putting it out there, or not the first thing that you do is having a press release, but rather the first thing are that you make sure you have messaging guidelines and communication rules. And a second thing is probably you have to assume that not everyone is a sustainability expert. So be patient with the people, but make sure that they understand where the boundaries are. Like, some things are just not there. And that same education, I think, also applies to your leaders and your executives and the other people involved, that they understand if something was achieved, how can we communicate it? So I think actually, like, when I take a look at what I do on a daily basis, most of the things that I do are around communication. So how do we make sure customers understand it? How do we make sure the employees understand it? How do we communicate success stories? It's a lot. And I mean, that communication also requires, of course, knowledge, but it's definitely a crucial part, I think, of sustainability positions.
Absolutely, yeah. Because you, at the end of the day, end up as a role model for those companies that maybe other unicorns, but haven't taken that much of a thought on their sustainability agenda, which maybe is a good moment to give them an opportunity to learn. Can you share a few of the initiatives that you've kicked off over the last few months in Celonis?
Yeah, so happy to. So maybe I need to step a bit back to like how we do it in general. Like, we do have an very integrated ESG approach, means we're focusing on environmental action, on social action, and also on the governance. And we also acknowledge the fact that we do have a direct impact on the things we do in the organization, and an indirect impact on what we do with customers and partners. And we've done and defined that in a very strategic way based on a materiality matrix, and we have it based on like the strategic and material issues for ourselves. And then what we also do, and that's probably also coming from the startup still. We are very entrepreneurial still in hypergrowth. So that means one of our operating principles is focus and innovate. We call it FISA, but you can look it up. But it's mainly about making sure we understand with like the kind of effort we put in, what kind of impact do we achieve. So every initiative that we do, we measure how much effort, how much impact is generated. And on that matrix, we decide, okay, do or don't. And that's an approach I can highly recommend, because whenever you open up the box of sustainability, you get tons of ideas, potentials, and things. Like, your employees are involved, you get everything. And then you have to find the resources to actually execute the initiatives. So a few of the things that we have done, for example, in the environmental section, we have started to look at our travel policies and the office policies. Fun thing is, I mean, during COVID times, no one is really in the offices and traveling, but we make sure that we are like prepared once we start again. Another thing that we also started to do is look into our procurement and improve that towards a more sustainable procurement. And we founded a community of experts internally that we call the Celonis for Sustainability community. And everyone that wants to get involved and share knowledge can start there. So the cool thing is, whenever we also have small tasks, we can basically give that to some people in the community and they work on it. Another focus was a huge diversity and community-based focus. So we founded communities for women at Celonis, pride at Celonis, parents at Celonis, and resilience at Celonis. And the employees get involved there heavily. We also build out some training around unconscious bias and diversity, which is also quite a large chunk. And we're currently working on our reporting, which is a big thing. And then on the other hand, we've worked strongly on the solutions with our software. So we actually build out some first examples and demos on how you can track your carbon emissions in the supply chain, or how you can improve supplier sustainability, or how you can reduce waste in the processes. And we started co-innovation projects with customers. And there's, for example, one thing that we did with EY and really looking at the carbon footprint that has been pretty exciting, and do that with a customer. So those kind of first projects have started as well. It's due to the fact that we made sustainability such a priority also in our product. I think that's probably something that every company has to decide for their own if that's impactful for them. So yeah, for the internal initiatives, I can recommend the community approach quite a lot in a startup and hypergrowth world, because you will have a lot of engaged employees.
Yeah, this is really good and practical advice. I think it's quite important to listen to the employees, especially when it comes to this topic, because at least even in Plan A, I mean, we sell the topic of sustainability as a business, and people have ideas on further improvements and further suggestions on how the company can be even more impactful. Which brings me to a curious question. So for those of the people that have been on LinkedIn, or have been reading the Wall Street Journal, or have been seeing like a few kind of social media posts from your company and also employees of it, like what we notice is that there's something called the $10 million impact campaign, which is running at the moment. And I've seen like so many posts about it. It's really working well. Can you tell us a bit more about what this exactly is?
Yeah, by the way, also to share that, like, it's employees can be a great source of marketing if you make a challenge out of it and that the post at the same time. Like, but yeah, so what we're currently running on a global level is called the Execution Capacity Challenge. And what we basically saw in the last years of running a business is across all our accounts and customers that we usually on average can for sure find 10 million of saving potentials in a business process. And that 10 million, that can come from any financial processes, but it can also come from production, it can come from procurement, it can come from the logistics and the supply chain. And that's where we're like super certain that this technology can be applied to any global business, and we always find the 10 million. And now, one thing that we discuss internally is how can you make sure that people get this commitment and that we're so sure about. And that's why we said, okay, we find the 10 million, or we donate 100K that we have, just that we have to a charity of their choice. And this shows the commitment, because we're just like, I mean, honestly, from a sustainability perspective, of course, I say let's donate. But in the same time, we're also aware that if companies save 10 million, they can either do this also by being more sustainable, and we find opportunities basically during that challenge, or if they save the 10 million because they don't do any other repeatable work, any kind of manual work, what do they do with the 10 million? And that's for me also a challenge, and that I would challenge all the companies being in that progress. You can invest that 10 million in terms of being more innovative, bring into initiatives that actually could use the money, be more sustainable, innovate your processes in your company. So this is what we also hope to achieve here. And the 100K are basically what we bring to the table. And we're super excited about it. And actually now companies are just coming in at the moment. And we will see in a few weeks what we achieved. And there are already ideas of running that also for different topics. So hopefully we can even have a challenge in the future where we say, let's make you more sustainable, or I don't know, we donate again. We'll see.
That's cool. That's really cool. Now I understand like where this all came from, because I mean, this is a cool campaign to associate yourself with. How do you define success for your work? So you mentioned quite a lot of different initiatives, but what do you want to achieve? Maybe it could have a timestamp, but maybe like, what is your vision for Celonis and its sustainability agenda?
Yeah. So, I mean, personally, for me right now, one success factor is already to see how this can become a driver and a value driver for so many employees. Like, I love to see that force in terms of making sure you engage your team, you engage your people, and then what they make possible for the customers and partners. from like a real tangible level, what we want to achieve with the company is, first of all, that we want to have our house in order. It's super important. We are a software company. We have not 10,000 employees, just 1,000. So our footprint might not be as big as with other companies, also because we don't have a production and tangible product and so on, but we still have a footprint. And for us, it may be even easier to be carbon neutral way earlier than others. So this is what I challenge ourselves to be. Like, make sure we take that responsibility of a maybe smaller footprint and be there earlier than others. And the other thing that we see is the huge product potential, and where we measure success in terms of how many companies have we actually made more sustainable, how much waste have we saved, how much carbon emissions. And when we take a look at the books just being published last week with Bill Gates, etc., I mean, we have a responsibility to be in that space, and that's where we measure success. Like, how much did we do for our customers and for the ecosystem, and therefore for the world, because those are the large corporations. And on a side note, because I haven't mentioned the initiative, I think we also run a program with educational grants on the side, which is called the Aspire program, where we basically combat educational inequality by like giving people that don't have access to education the financial funds for it. And obviously we want to reach as many people as we can with that program. So that's kind of the social perspective, and behind also the idea of democratizing education and technology. So that's the bit of the other side, but really like the value for the customers that we can achieve, that is incredible, I think. And that's how we measure success.
Can you explain a bit more about this initiative related to education? Because this sounds super exciting.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically education was always kind of the core DNA of Celonis. We were founded at a university. Our founders basically got a super great education, which enabled them to build the company. So for them, it was always one of the most important things. It was also the reason why we have the Academic Alliance. We have other free software products. We do a lot, like our training is for free and so on. So you basically think always about how can we empower everyone else and the next generation. What happened in 2019 is that we won the German President's Award, or our founders did, and that prize is awarded to companies that have a value for their industry, but also for society. And the prize money that was awarded to our founders is basically up to them how to use it. And the three of them decided that they want to basically create a fund for education to give back to the education they have received. And we doubled the fund with company money, and now it's called Aspire as a program. And people can basically go to the website and apply as an individual or as an organization. I think what's important is it's about access to education. So it's actually meant to be for people that have difficulties getting education at all, not so much about someone being at university and wanting to proceed. And we also focus on youth. So it's mainly from like age 15 upwards, because I believe that, and as a program manager, I'm also really standing behind this, there are already a lot of programs for the younger kids and for the first education, but often these programs stop after that. And then there's huge trouble in like continuing education, which is super crucial for studying or working in a company later. So this is why the program focuses on that. So in case anyone in the audience knows someone that needs that kind of funding, or also mentorship that we will provide with the Celonauts, or employees, feel free to go to the website and check it out.
Amazing. We have a question from the audience, which is, how would you recommend businesses to start on their sustainability journey? Please, everyone, add your questions to the Q&A section and also vote on the questions you want to see answered. But yeah, this is a good one to start with. Yeah.
So I think there are two ways to start it. And I will start with the first one that we did at first hand, but then I could also recommend the other one. So the first way to start it is start it as a grassroots initiative, and basically have like a team or some engaged employees, could be at any level of the organization, that assess basically why would we do sustainability? What's the opportunity behind it? What's the kind of beliefs that we have? What are our values? And start with like defining that in a few workshops. and also being super honest, strategically analyze your market, strategically analyze what your customers want, start with the materiality metrics, and then go from there. What I can also recommend is getting C-level buy-in as early as possible, which is easier in smaller companies, more difficult in larger companies. That's why I say, like, when you're a startup, start with the grassroots initiative. When you're a much larger, try to get to your C-level as early as possible with the same arguments.
And we have another question that is a bit more topical related to what we went through in 2020 and we're still going through, which is COVID. Do you think COVID made sustainability a bigger priority? Do you think, maybe if we can use the example of Celonis, if you think that it picked up a lot?
In some cases, yes, in some others not. So if I look at our customers, for example, when we have a look at supply chain and procurement areas, like the ones that were also affected and had to prove that they're resilient and strong, in those areas, it also accelerated sustainability, because those people had to strategically look at their topics again and say, okay, what are our new priorities and how can we improve as fast as possible? And then while you're already in the build-up phase of new things, while you're becoming more efficient, while you're trying to be more resilient, you can't leave out sustainability. That's something that we have seen. For other processes, areas of business, and so on, I think it went a bit down on the priority list, to be honest, because for some, it is really about preserving the cash flow, making sure that the company runs. And then it depends a little bit on how you perceive sustainability. So for example, what I saw a lot is that companies, and we also did that at Celonis, watched a lot more out for their employee safety, health, well-being, and resilience. And while you might think that this is not a sustainable issue, it actually is. So it also ties into the social aspect of ESG. So I think that was, for example, an area that accelerated much more, while at the same time measuring the carbon footprint of your offices and your travels might become less important because you're just like not doing it. So you're feeling like, okay, then let's not spend time to look at it. So I think it depends on where you look.
Yeah, I can definitely say that, because when the pandemic launched, we basically had a product that was doing exactly that. Since then, obviously, like, it's been a year and we've added so much functionality and served many industries that are specifically focused on kind of more complex setups, events, supply chains, and so on. And yeah, offices are still relevant. There's still very little to be, looking at that. Sorry. Another question about again, more practically about Celonis. It's about how do you deal with the fast growing pace of the company, and ensuring impact in this whole process, but also how did you go through this? Because I think there's people from the audience that are actually working in these kinds of companies. I even recognize one. Yeah, it would be great if you can also share what was the feeling along the process.
So, I mean, hypergrowth is, and we have this picture quite often in Celonis, is like you're sitting in a rocket ship and like everything is rattling and it's hard and it's sometimes like difficult, but it's also going quite fast. Your destination is well-defined and nice. But yeah, all the rest, it's also, there's a lot of uncertainty as well all around you if you like reach that goal. And in hypergrowth, there are good things and bad things. Like the good things is that things are moving super quickly and you can use that for sustainability. You can use the fact that if you have engaged employees, if you have customers that demand it, you will get resources earlier, you will get power on it. You, like, if everyone sees like, oh, okay, there's potential, then all of a sudden you get new positions and you get people that work on it. And also in terms of like working with customers and partners, you're also faster than others. And you're also perceived as like the innovator. So when you come to customers and talk about sustainable solutions, they're like, oh, yeah, this is no, like, how fast can we do it? And you're like, yeah, we can start tomorrow. So this is something that you have in hypergrowth, and also internally, basically, I mean, things change fastly, and there's always a push towards things. But for topics like sustainability that are also quite long-term oriented and that not always generate success stories immediately, that can also definitely be a challenge. And you always have to fight to be on top of the priority list. Like and that's again where it comes to communication and how you basically stay ahead of your game and make sure, okay, I understand the current business priorities and I tie in sustainability wherever they go. Like you make sure that they understand it's not like one topic and they can basically say, oh, okay, no, it's not relevant anymore. No, you make sure that this is in everything that we could possibly come up. For example, that the execution capacity challenge that you mentioned, I mean, one could say it's a marketing campaign, but then on the other hand, you can say, yeah, but what do we do if we lose? Okay, we donate. And then where do we donate to? Let's select those organizations wisely and help the organizations, see that as a value driver. So this is, I think, what you have to be quite adaptable and flexible in hypergrowth. And that is for sustainability. So basically keep everything that you know about sustainability and ESG to like close to you and make sure you throw it in wherever you can. That's, I think, building up sustainability and hypergrowth.
Nice. This is really fantastic. And I think I like the ship metaphor, the ship moving fast.
You should know that, right?
yeah. I mean, not a unicorn yet, but still definitely our canoe is expanding as we go down the journey. We have a few questions from the audience about ESG. So you did mention it in the beginning, and I think it's quite it's becoming quite prominent, especially with new regulations and so on, with the EU, with the Green Deal, the EU taxonomy. So there's two questions, and I let you kind of shape the answers in the most appropriate way to the work that you're doing. What are the most important metrics at Celonis for assessing progress towards ESG goals? And then the second question is, how did you target specifically these metrics?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So first of all, maybe one comment on ESG. I think it's a great framework, especially when you get started and you don't have many sustainability experts in your company to kind of structure all the different ideas and so on that you get. What I also keep in mind always, that we still don't see this as like a fixed core set of like, this is it, and we cannot like go right or left. The other thing that is also important, however, if you decide to report on it, you have to stick to the guidelines. So then you can't really say, oh, okay, we don't like this anymore, so let's go somewhere else. So what we're doing at Celonis, we're sticking to the greenhouse gas protocol and also to some of the GRI standards for the beginning. We are not a super large company that everything can be applied already, but for what we have to use, we use. And then in terms of ESG, so for example, for the environment section, we have energy use, carbon emissions, and waste, which we can also tie into carbon emissions. So those are kind of the areas that we have. And by energy, for example, it's like the internal IT, but it's also, I mean, we're a cloud provider, making sure we have that covered, which then already goes into scope 2, into scope 3, which can be harder, but still, like, that's our material issue, so you have to look at it. For the social side, it's diversity in terms of whole company and leadership, underrepresented minorities in the US, and also we report on basically check marks of if we have some guidelines. So it's also about like the health of employees and so on. And governance is the policies that we have towards our suppliers. Then we also have governance related data security and information security, which is crucial for a company like ours. And also like code of conduct and so on, and like these things that you have and the whole governance structure. So these are the kind of metrics that we use. And again, measuring success, I mean, carbon is quite obvious because that's like the first thing that everyone thinks about when thinking about sustainability. So that's also a big thing for us. And as we said, our carbon footprint might not be the largest, but like that's why we have to be successful with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then there's a question that is more like a problem that maybe you can help solve. Like, I face this challenge currently at Snowflake. Snowflake obviously is quite of a huge company. Yeah. Probably the fastest ever growing software company. I started the internal grassroots initiative about sustainability and climate change. However, because of the super fast pace, business changes actually, things actually move slower due to limited time. And basically, like Simon is saying, like it's not a question, more like a comment. Maybe you can share some piece of advice on how to put this high on the agenda and turn this into a business KPI.
Yeah. So one recommendation I can have: be a bit patient, because I thought so the same in the first weeks, and it's like in a hypergrowth environment, you measure time differently. So for you, probably some weeks and months feel like a lifetime, while for other companies, that's the usual thing of how a project runs. So be a bit patient. And then the other thing that I can definitely recommend is make the case in terms of the value that it brings, and tie it directly to the market opportunity that your company has in terms of sales. Because what happens with the big software companies especially is, for them, they are strongly sales oriented. It's like one of the main things that they do. So making sure that your C-levels, or like even your managers, understand what kind of opportunity for the company is in there, that helps. And for Snowflake, I mean, public now, so some things have to happen. Also take advantage of that, what might be requested from external parties, and what kind of risks are tied to it. So, I mean, you can, in a hypergrowth environment, you can also argue with the growth all the time, because you will grow in the future, and then some things became more relevant and faster relevant to you than for other companies.
And now, as we're coming to an end of this fantastic discussion that has been super insightful, I think, one thing that is always on people's mind is, we're all battling together for a more sustainable reality, and we're seeing a lot more movement at the moment on the topic. But still, the problem hasn't shrank, like it's nothing smaller than it was yesterday. Are you optimistic about the future?
Depends on the days, but yeah, generally I am. I mean, generally I am optimistic, because I see a lot of progress still in companies. Just if I look at how many startups and companies like Planet were founded in the last year and years and months, I think it's definitely on top of minds for the next generation to come, and that generation now comes into the workforce. So these are the people that will work on it, and that makes me very optimistic. And I also think that we, at least in various areas, we have a strong tendency to learn more, understand more, and work towards it. What sometimes makes me not so optimistic is seeing how slow things also can go in the current pandemic, which is a crisis situation, like the climate crisis is as well. And sometimes you feel like, oh, okay, if we don't manage to vaccinate, for example, so many people in Germany fast enough, then how should we manage the things that come with climate change? So that's sometimes questions you have to ask yourself. But I also strongly believe that we can learn from what we do wrong now, and maybe that's the perfect practice thing. Like maybe we got the pandemic to practice for climate change.
Hopefully the scale of the drama doesn't expand if we take the lessons in the right manner. Janina, thank you so much for this. It was so educational and really packed with a lot of practical information that can help companies, not only of the size of yours, but also of smaller ones. And thank you so much for this. And now to finish off, I would like to maybe invite you to just close off with a few sentences.
First of all, thank you, Lubomir, for having me. Always a great pleasure to talk to you, and super eager to see you grow as well, hopefully at the same pace at Celonis. Thank you also to the audience for the super interesting questions. I can invite you, if there's anything that wasn't answered, or any I don't know, question you still have or that comes up to your mind, you can also contact me on LinkedIn or send me an email or so. And yeah, I invite you all to get involved somehow. Find that one thing that you can do that has impact for you, whether it's in your job or in your private life. Do it, stick to it, create a habit, and that will change a lot also for the whole system. But thankful for anyone that gets involved.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Fantastic evening. I'm just going to close off by sharing with everyone about our next event, which is going to be happening on the 25th of March with O2. O2 Telefonica will Kirkpatrick is the head of sustainability and social impact. They're doing fantastic work on reducing electronic waste, on engaging their employees, engaging their customers. And they've been doing this actually a lot before it was cool to be sustainable. So join us there. You're going to get an email tomorrow with more information on how you can sign up. Chat soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.